Welcome to this episode of the Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez.
I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan.
Tonight, we talk about the Department of Finance after the exit of one of its undersecretaries and the economy in general. Very interesting
What kind
expiration
of
niya.
exit?
Exit.
Ha?
Ano ibig sabihin?
Expiration nga. Bakit?
Hindi siya
Bumitaw,
termination,
pinagpitaw.
hindi siya resignation, expiration of
of
tenure.
Parang karne, di ba? Parang gulay.
May tenure pala.
Gulay sa palengke.
Expiry date,
Tenure
ano?
pala.
Hindi, pero
Use by.
conflicting siya, di ba? Kasi pag tenured ka nga, di
Ba't
ba?
may expiration?
Hindi naman nag-expire.
Wala yatang tenure dun
Until-
sa ano.
Pero kung ano man yan, exit. At saka mas excited ako pag-usapan, bakit nag-exit? Diba? Bakit tayo humantong sa
Yan,
ganito?
At sino nagpa-exit?
Ayun.
Yun yung sino Oo.
Oo.
Sino, kailan, meron din kailan.
Who, what,
Diba?
when, where,
Kailan
why?
Oo.
And then
Kailan
how?
in-offer yung pag-exit o hiningi yung pag-exit.
Oo.
No.
At
And of course, why? Diba? Yun ang malaman
Ah.
Yun ang malaman.
Ang punot dulo naman to, ang pinag-upisa naman talaga nito is yung price cap, and that was clearly a trigger here, unless I'm wrong. So, gusto ko rin malaman yun kung ano
Hindi.
yung mga...
Actually, ang trigger yung pinost niya na chart, which
Yung
is
law of
such
supply
a
and demand.
classic chart.
Oo.
I mean, that's
Kaya
the
lang-
first thing they teach you in economics.
Yung timing kasi sinabay dun daw sa sa order ng Malacanang.
So, on the
To
price cap.
impose the price.
Diba?
Kaya ang sabi nga ng iba, ipa-repeal na lang yung law na yan para wala nang problema.
Sino mo magsaysayan?
Oo nga pala, no?
Yung unconfirmed dyan na story about Ramon Magsaysay. Unconfirmed.
Well,
Repeal that
so
law.
much to talk about and so many interesting things to go into. We will be talking to former Undersecretary CIELO MAGNO. She joins us in a bit. And we welcome our guest this week, former Finance Undersecretary. Ma'am, is that right? Can we say former Finance
Yes.
Undersecretary this time? Okay.
Former nga.
CIELO MAGNO, she's back teaching at the UP School of Economics. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us
Good
tonight.
evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for inviting
Well,
me.
thank you for
Thank
coming
you
over.
for being here. Yeah.
Ma'am, a bit of confusion over your exit from the DOF. Well, sabi nga ng Malacanang, your tenure expired.
Yeah.
What exactly happened? Kayo ba'y nag-resign? Kayo ba'y tinanggal? Kayo ba'y nag-away? Kayo ba'y ano pa?
Well, we had a discussion, Secretary and Jokno and I had a discussion last Wednesday about a matter that I posted in Facebook. And I said that I'm okay resigning. So I submitted a resignation letter last Wednesday.
But were you asked to resign?
Yes, I was asked to resign because I
But by
posted
whom?
something in Facebook
By
by Secretary
Secretary
Jokno with an instruction from Malacanang to
Okay.
remove me.
And that's what he said, that he was actually just relaying instructions.
He showed
from
me a
Malacanang.
text message from Malacanang.
So is it safe to assume that Secretary Jokno was, I mean, it wasn't initiated by him or that
It
was
wasn't
given-
initiated by him.
Yeah.
There was an July of this year. He was already asked to remove me.
So
Yes, so he was asked to remove me because of being Kakampink.
Again,
Okay.
just the question, asked by whom?
Malacanang.
Malacanang
yeah,
pa rin.
Yeah, it was Malacanang. And I knew that Secretary Jokno talked to the President to explain that I'm helping him with all the reforms that we are doing at the DOF. And he said that the President said, okay, he can keep me.
So when you say Malacanang, it's not the president.
Well, the text message did not come from the President. Yeah.
But just to be clear, you have been with the government only after President Marcos assumed office.
Yes.
So they knew whom they were hiring, right?
I assume. When I was asked by Secretary Jokno to join government, my initial reaction actually was, is this a prank? So a friend of mine said, do you think Secretary Jokno has a time to prank you? And then he asked me to immediately report at the Department of Finance. The first thing I did when I reported at the Department of Finance is to make my Facebook public, so everyone can see where I stand and what are my take on issues, because I want to be very transparent. If I'm going to work with the government, I want them to know my history. I want them
Yes,
to know who I am. And I think it's very easy. If you Google my name, you can see all my
Yes.
Ma'am,
previous
but for
media
those who
interviews.
haven't had a chance to go to your Facebook profile, how could they view Dr. Magno? Ano ho yung position ninyo kumbaga?
On various issues.
Yes, ma'am.
I've done a lot of interviews with media before on various issues. I've been very active with respect to the extractive sector. Globally, I'm part of the board of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, so you know where I stand with
Oh, sige,
respect
dun
to
sa election na lang,
mining
2016,
taxation.
2016 election, kasi yun ang ginagawang issue
Yes.
na bakit daw nag-hire ng Kakampink.
Yes.
Although, at that time, no, at the start of this administration, in fact, the new president was being praised for recruiting, especially for the economic team, from all political,
Colors,
the entire
the spectrum.
spectrum, di ba?
Right.
He was actually being praised for that. But anyway, tell us your position. Noong 2016, were you part of the campaign or were you just a citizen?
I wasn't part of the campaign, but I
Yes.
voted for Leni Robredo,
Yes.
similar to a lot of people believing that we need change in this country. So I voted for Leni.
You were not active in the campaign.
I wasn't
You-
part of the campaign group. I cannot because I'm a professor of UP.
But
I
you were
can-
critical of the elder Marcos
Oh,
siguro.
definitely. Definitely,
Okay.
and I don't deny that. And you can see that in my Facebook. And I have several interviews. Not just the Elder Marcos, I already said, before joining government, the president has to pay his tax liabilities. That's not a secret. You can Google it, it's there. So when I joined, I made it all public, everything that's in my
Yeah,
Facebook.
and to Ami's point,
Yeah.
when you and a few other people were appointed to various positions, I think people saw that as refreshing. I think a lot of people took that as reassuring. Maybe he means it when he talks about unity. I think people also found it reassuring that people like you had accepted it. Maybe that could be some kind of a barometer as well of what would happen. You still are, I think, at this point, a barometer. But if you could go back to that, if you could speak to the call for unity, and how did that factor into your decision to take this up? And what did you see of government, of the Marcos administration, once you were there? Again, in the context of, let's get past political lines.
Yeah, I think it was, initially I hesitated. It was a very difficult decision for me, but I thought I have to give this a chance. Because at the end of the day, regardless of who's in Malacanang, we have to work and fight for the interests of the people. So, hindi naman tayo pwedeng maghintay ng another 6 years to help the public, right? Yung epekto ng mga policies that the government will implement will affect all of us. So if I'm given the opportunity to help and make things relevant to the public and make sure that the interests of the people are protected, then why not?
Okay.
So that's why I said yes.
And how did it feel actually being in government? And for all your trepidation, for all your hesitation, what was it actually like to be in the Department of Finance?
It's a very, very powerful position. It's very, very powerful to be in government because you have an armory of policies that you can implement. But if there's one thing that I think I realized in joining government, you have to be very careful in terms of the policies that you implement. Kailangan pinag-iisipan. Because unlike when you're outside government, you can make recommendations, but they don't have actual consequences unless they're adopted. But if you're in government, the policies that you adopt will have actual consequences to the lives of the people.
I ask still in the context still of you, Professor CIELO Magno, and in the context of President Bongbong Marcos. The President saying, we will rise above politics, we will listen to sides, and then you actually having that voice now, that's one thing I'm curious about.
Yeah.
We will still get to the politics of the past week.
Yeah.
But by and large, was the experience surprising to you in both positive and negative ways?
It was a good experience in the sense that Secretary Jokno gave us enough flexibility to examine and propose policies that will have positive impact to the public. So for example, one concrete example, and this is part of the agenda of the Department of Finance, is the review of the fiscal regime on mining. I have been a very vocal advocate of the increase in tax on mining, and that's part of the fiscal agenda of the Department of Finance. So we are working on that. And interestingly, and this is how things started evolving. The bill that's now pending in the House of Representatives, instead of increasing the tax, will be decreasing the tax on mining. So I think that's contrary to the principles that we should be advocating at the Department of Finance, especially if our mandate is to collect tax and make sure that we get a just or a fair share for the government with respect to the extractive sector. So it's becoming a bit difficult for me to push for the reforms that we've agreed we're going to push.
Ma'am, so much to talk about, but we are just warming up. We will continue this conversation after a quick break. Please stay with us.
The country's economic team is apparently not consulted at all over the rice price ceiling.
Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno admitted that the economic team was not consulted about the order and that they were shocked by it. Senator Risa Ontiveros is not surprised by the reaction, noting that the government's action towards the issue appeared to have been, quote, strategically planned to generate chaos in the industry. Meanwhile, Senator Amy Marcos was in disbelief about the current situation of the rice industry. She said that her father, the late President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., would rise from the dead and declare martial law if he were still alive.
Welcome back to Chiefs, and still with us, former Finance Undersecretary CIELO Magno. Ma'am, you mentioned nga nung July, pinaglaban pa kayo ni Secretary Jokno.
Yes.
But this time, was he still fighting back or did he just give in willingly? I mean, was he still there? With you?
Pangalawang beses na eh.
I'm not sure anymore, but I think because there was willingness for me to resign the first time around, and this one, it was a very easy decision for me. I knew when I posted that graph in your Facebook account that
Supply
this
demand.
will happen. So I knew.
Were you in fact pushing it?
Yes.
You knew
Yes.
that there would be consequences
Yes.
to it.
Yes.
Kung pinigil ka ba ni Secretary Jokno, would you have
I
agreed
was
to it?
I was ready to go back to UP.
Pero wala
But-
siyang ganong message kasi there was an initial report that he was actually trying to stop it. Not stop you, but stop the
Yeah,
termination.
he did that last July.
Okay.
He did that last
not,
July.
not this time.
This time, I'm not sure.
But
But you know,
may
the
ganun
fact that Secretary Jokno now says that he was
Out of the
caught
loop.
unaware.
Shocked.
And,
That's the word.
in
Yeah.
shock, diba? About the decision to impose a price
Yeah.
ceiling. How do you feel about that? Do you somehow feel that Secretary Jokno was saying in effect that you did nothing wrong, it wasn't a maligning
Yeah.
statement?
Yeah. No, I'm very happy that he actually made that public statement. And that the economic managers were never consulted with respect to this price cap issue.
okay.
So, and then I think that's a very important factor for
Yes.
me too. Yung
That-
sinasabi ko kanina.
So,
Ah,
ngayon,
just
nasa
teka,
fight
yun yung question ko because we're showing the graph there behind you.
There.
Yeah.
What's the
Classic.
story before? I mean, obviously this broke the camel's back. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a
The
final
graph that
straw
broke
for
the
you.
camel's back.
But tell us what happened before you posted this, because that was my question. Was there debate? Was there consultation? Was this something na pinaglalaban nyo in the Department of Finance and with Malacanang and so on? Gaano kahaba yung usapan before it finally got
Or
to this?
Robbie, was
Wala.
this even an option?
Oh, kaya nga, yun
Diba?
nga yung ano ko.
The standard
not discussed.
procedure with respect to government, and there's a memo on this, is that if there are proposed policies, they're circulated to all government agencies for review and feedback. In this case, on the price cap, we didn't see that.
Wala.
So that's why sinabi ni Secretary Jokno, nagulat sila. Because they're actually outside the country when this EO was released. And
So the economic team was not consulted. The grains retailers were not consulted. Tanong ngayon ng lahat, kanino nang galing yung idea?
we don't
DTI
know.
daw, DTI daw. Ang kausap niya.
Although,
And of course,
yeah,
DA, siya yun,
DTI
no?
and DA
Yeah.
ang hindi nagsasabi. They're not the ones saying it, ha? Pero
Yeah.
sino kaya yon?
I don't know. That's why medyo, kasi ganun yung thinking ko eh. That's why I said yung learning sa government, you have to be very, very careful. Kaya malaking issue sa akin to. Kasi when you're in government, ang laki ng consequences and impact ng action mo.
Yeah.
So this one was just immediately adopted. But the bottom line is, how is this affecting the Filipino people?
Yeah.
Diba? Yes, it may look good, it might sound popular because bakit pa nga hindi ginawang 20 pesos? Bakit 45 pesos pa eh,
Oo,
no?
kung
Di ba
magpa-price
ginawang
ceiling ka na rin
20 pesos sana.
No, but sige, let's dwell on that for a moment. Of course, the President is saying that this is such a temporary regime, no? It's not going to last for very long. He expects that by the time harvest season comes again, production will be normalized and prices will recover.
Yes, but there were also previous press releases and there were discussions that we have sufficient rice supply,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So we go back to the question, what are we trying to solve when this proposal was adopted? They're saying, okay, we have rice cartels, we have import cartels, and the prices are increasing. Sabi ko, when you're in government, we have armory of policy solutions. Is this the best policy solution to address cartels?
Yeah.
This is the best policy solution to address hoarding. In fact, it will worsen hoarding. So if those are the two questions that we want to address, clearly, a price cap will not address those two.
Okay,
so why
ma'am,
would we
ma'am,
do that?
question, ma'am,
Secretary
question,
Jokno
Professor.
Apparently, Secretary Jokno now says, yeah, I agree.
Yes,
Kasi
exactly.
his statement now is,
He's
we
in
agree
shock.
with the President that implementing a price cap on rice is the most prudent course. So after getting shocked,
Biglang
biglang
cambio.
okay tayo dun. So what do you think of that?
Well, I disagree. I don't think this is the best solution to address rice cartel if they exist and hoarding. No?
Okay. a professor. and
Question.
I'm
So
saying
it
professor.
has been implemented.
Oo nga.
Did we address hoarding?
Hindi.
Did
Kaya
we
nga.
find the rice cartel?
Ay, di, but people will say, "Saan naman to, 1 linggo pa lang," and so on.
Hindi, but what was the
professor, ito yung
consequence?
tanong ko, no, not USEC, professor.
Yes.
Because as you said, yes, it's obviously, there's a populist bent here. A lot of people will not even understand what's going on. I won't pretend that I understand everything about that graph and every area that's there. Could you give us that 1-minute professorial lecture, make people understand?
Yeah.
Ito yung sinasabi natin about price cap.
You know, economics is a reflection of human behavior. So, ikaw yung tatanungin ko, if there's a price cap, binaba yung presyo lower than the market price, as a middle-class individual, what's the first thing that you're gonna do?
Hoard.
Oh, bili ako.
Exactly.
Mura.
Habang mura,
Ayos.
bibili ako ng marami.
Bibili ako ng marami.
Sorry,
Okay.
hoarder ako.
If you're the seller, anong gagawin mo if you bought the price, the rice higher than
Right.
the price
Hold on
cap?
to your
Wag mo
stock.
muna, wag muna.
magbenta. So maraming gustong bumili, especially sa middle class. Walang gustong magbenta sa traders and the sellers. Anong mangyayari?
Super deflation. I mean, shortage.
Walang food na available. Walang rice na magiging available. Or if they're forced to sell, you will have adulterated rice because you have to lower the cost of what you're selling especially sa mga maliliit na maninenda. Now, if you're also forced to sell at that price, kung ikaw yung trader, bibili ka sa farmer, anong gagawin mo sa
Titipirin mo.
farmer?
Talaga.
Titipirin mo yung farmer.
Babarating.
So, lugi-lugi.
Babarating is the
Yan ang
word.
sabi ng mga
Yes.
farmer.
But if you're the
binabarat
farmer,
kami.
napaka-ikli ng PC mo
kasi
di ba? So
mabubulok
mapipilitan
pati.
kang
Oo.
ibenta
Right.
yung
Oh,
palay
so-
na inani mo at a very low
So,
price.
ito
So
ngayon
ano yung nangyari sa lahat?
Ito yung tanong ngayon sa tindahan namin, doon sa sari-sari store. So, malinaw yung ano nyo, lahat talo, no?
Yes.
Eh, ang tanong parati sa tindahan, sino kumikita?
Sino nga ang kikita? That's always the question So from my perspective, that's why this policy is wrong, is walang nakikinabang. Di ba? Consumers, walang mabibili, lalo na yung mga mas mababa ang income. Hindi ka naman makakapag-imbak Gustuhin mo mang bumili, yung mga sellers hindi magbebenta kasi malulugi sila. Yung mga magsasaka, agrabyado kasi mabilitang magbenta at below the cost.
So, anong benefit nun? Political lang?
Magandang
Yun lang?
tingnan, di ba? Bumaba yung presyo ng
Oo,
bigas.
yun
But the
lang.
real consequences are not really good for everyone.
Hindi naman bumaba.
Hindi nga raw
Black market.
and when,
But kasi,
I monitor rice prices every
and
day.
that's the thing. This can also create black market.
Yeah.
Kasi kung wala ka nang mabili, middle class will be, no, I still want to buy good rice. Saan ba tayo pwedeng bumili?
Ayun yung
dyan?
kumikita.
So, black
Yun yung
market can
kumikita, yung
then
black market.
set a price higher than
Okay.
what the
Ayun.
price
Nagbigay
before.
naman ng
the price
subsidy,
ceiling.
15,000. What
For
do
the-
you think of the subsidy?
Yun na nga balikan uli yung ano ba yung problema na tinatry nating isolve. Kung ang presyo ng bigas ay nagiging masyadong mahal para sa mga mahihirap, pwede namang diniretso na sana yung subsidy sa mahihirap. Instead of
For the
ngayon,
consumer.
nag-price cap ka, ganito, tas ngayon bibigyan mo ng subsidy yung mga retailers.
Komplikado.
Kulang nga actually para daw
Napipilitan
sa
mong
kanila.
huwag magbenta ng market rate na luging-lugi. So parang paikot-ikot at magulo.
Yung argument, as LCV said, na hindi, temporary lang naman to Dadating naman po to, luluwagan natin to. When that time comes, what is the pent-up energy on all sides of this that we will have to deal with?
Sabi ko nga, nung isang araw, kung totoo yung pinress release ni Speaker na bumaba na yung presyo ng bigas globally, hindi ba time na yun to lift the price cap?
Ma'am, totoo nga ba yun? Kasi I was seeing
Hindi.
different numbers Completely different numbers.
The opposite report came out na
That's actually
nagtatighten
very...
because of India.
It's very funny to actually associate. If it's true na bumaba yung presyo, but it's not hindi siya totoo na
I was seeing
i-associate yun sa...
twice the amount twice the numbers.
Oo. And to even claim that nagkaroon ng pagbaba ng
Because
presyo
of-
because of the price cap is already a stretch of the imagination na.
Can I go back to, so you said...
Actually, yun yung ano. So you go back to ano ba yung purpose ba't nagkaroon ng price cap? Is this really to address the concerns of the public? Or is it to address a political campaign promise and make people believe that it has been delivered?
Okay.
Medyo malayo
Doon
na
sa
yun
ano,
pa
so
yun,
yung naibahagi nyo that this caught everybody by surprise, including Secretary Jokno. After you were all caught by surprise and it became public, what was the effort on the part of Secretary Jokno, the Department of Finance, your team, the economic managers, to at least ask Malacanang, "Uy, ano nangyayari? Is there time to talk about this?"
At that point, I think that was a weekend, we were asked for a memo. Specifically, it was assigned to me, requesting for suggestions on how to ease the situation of the retailers. So that was the question
After
that
the
were
fact.
asked. After the fact.
So you're now asked to
To manage the negative effects of the issuance.
What do you think of the word used by ES Bersamin that you maligned the government?
I think my work while I was in government would speak for itself. As I said, as advocating for higher tax on mining to make sure that we get a fair share as owner of the minerals, to make sure that we have enough funds shared to transfer to local government units to compensate communities affected by mining. That's one. The other advocacy that the other task that I was working on is I chaired the technical committee of the CREATE law, the one that provides
Yes.
incentives. Last February, Secretary Jokno and Secretary Pascual tasked me, fix the problems related to CREATE because there are a lot of investors complaining about CREATE. And I think the President encountered this in one of his state visit, specifically I think in Japan. So February, I worked with various agencies to fix the regulatory aspect of CREATE. We even had an amendment on the implementing rules and regulation of CREATE. I already have a compendium of policies, and we had a memo signed by all the secretaries, the OF, DBM, NEDA, DTI, saying that we already have solved the problems with respect to CREATE law.
Okay.
So, but the thing is, despite that, there's still an instruction to amend CREATE. CREATE is a very good law because it makes the awarding of incentives transparent. It makes the government accountable also because it makes sure that we award incentives where it's necessary.
Right.
But now there's instruction, despite the efforts of the economic managers, an instruction to amend it. Diba? And now a bill is filed to amend it. It's one of the important reforms adopted by the...
You're saying there's no need to amend it.
There's no
it's
need.
good as
It's a good
is.
law. It's a good law. But now there's effort to amend it. Again, sino yung makikinabang sa amendment ng CREATE law?
You're
Will it
talking about
benefit the
probably
public?
lobby groups.
Well, they want economic zones to have their own discretion again in terms of awarding incentives. They want certain domestic companies to have incentives with respect to VAT. There was very, very clear, sorry, this one is more economics, but there's very, very clear principle behind the train law that says, okay, if a good is exported, then there's no VAT to be collected, which makes sense because VAT is a consumption tax.
Okay.
So if a good is being consumed outside the country, it makes sense. It has to be zero VAT, right? If a good is consumed locally, then it has to have
Pwede,
VAT.
yes.
But now groups are lobbying that we have to have exemptions with respect to domestic company. But, that's the problem kasi. If we want to reduce the burden of tax to the people, you have to make sure we tax more.
Right.
Parang you spread the tax, you lower the rate. Kung bubutas-butasin na naman natin yan, we give exemptions to key sectors. We cannot lower the tax for the rest of the people that are forced to pay the tax.
I agree.
So again, I don't agree with that paradigm. So that's the second. And then the rice issue nga is the third. So even if, whether I'm fired,
Expired.
I have
Expired.
terminated, or I resign, I think it's time to go. So it wasn't that I don't need Secretary Ben to fight for me or even ask Malacanang to keep me because I'm okay to go. It's time to leave.
What by any chance during that meeting hindi ka sinabihang mag-resign? What would have happened? What would be your next step then?
Well, I was really slowly planning to
go.
Yes, because I'm watching all these things in my portfolio.
Yun, all these
No,
things.
but
Let's
would-
talk about
would
yung
he
all
have
these things,
prevailed
ha?
upon-
Nasa one pa lang tayo. Marami
But
pa yung all.
would Secretary Jokno have prevailed upon you? If he said, wag muna, well,
Well, we're working on, for example, the pension plan of the military.
Ayun
Susunod
eh.
natin.
Yan ang susunod.
Okay.
Yun ang
Okay,
cue
ma'am,
natin.
I'll hit the pause button there. We just need to go into a break, but we will go into that discussion after this break.
All right.
Please stay with us.
As far as I'm concerned, as a citizen of this republic, there is no pension without contribution.
The members of the judiciary, the prosecution service, and the constitutional commissions do not contribute to their pension. Ang pension system po ng military ay talagang non-contributory simula pa noong 1935.
Hindi namin gagalawin ang inyong pension. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang ligaya ninyo. Alright? Ang inaano po namin, yung new entrants, yung active personnel ng MUP.
Welcome back to the Chiefs, and still with us, Dr. CIELO Magno of the UP School of Economics. She was also an Undersecretary of the Department of Finance until last week. Ma'am, thank you for staying with us. Ma'am, under the DOF, you were taking the lead in several other issues that were being fleshed out, including the controversial MUP, the Military and Uniformed Personnel Pension Fund.
Yes.
Saan ho tayo naiwan doon?
Well, we're trying to get the support of the various stakeholders that are being affected by if we adopt this reform program. Technically, dapat I should be meeting with the retired generals this week to find common ground with respect to the reform.
Pero ang daming, specifically mga sticky issues. When we
Yes.
had Admiral Ariston
De Los
Reyes here last time, among other things, pumapalag sila doon, of course, sa contributions.
Yes.
Hanggang ngayon, pumapalag pa rin sila doon. For whatever amount, talagang pinapalagan nila.
Singled out daw sila. Kasi
yes.
other
branches.
services meron na non-contributory, the judges, the prosecutors, the heads of
Yeah.
constitutional bodies.
Among other things,
At ang minimum daw nila na pension, ranggo ng Major General in the military.
Among other things, they're insisting na walang contributions yung mga sundalo, for example, sa US. they don't contribute at all
Dito
to
lang
their
daw
pension.
ang magiging non-contributor.
That's actually not true. In other ASEAN countries, may contribution then. And in the US, there's a recent reform.
2018.
Yes, na nag-mandate din ng contribution for the military members of the United States of America. But
It's evolving na rin.
yes, but historically, if you look at the original law that created the GSIS in the 1970s, in that law, covered din ang military. So originally, they were part of GSIS and they were contributing in GSIS. But at that time, eventually, they were removed from GSIS kasi iba po yung risk profile ng military.
Yeah,
diba?
right.
Kumpara sa regular civil servant. So at that time, the pension of the military is starting to erode the pension of the civil servant. So they were removed. And then we had the RSBS.
Isa pa yun.
1973.
right.
Hindi raw
Diba?
pension fund yun,
Yes.
according to...
And how did he describe it if it's not a pension
kasi
fund?
they do contribute daw to RSBS, pero binabalik yung pera sa kanila eventually.
end of
Para siyang
their
paluwagan.
Yan, paluwagan sa word for it siguro.
Yes.
Kailan binabalik? May nabalik ba? So,
Ayun nga, yung nagkaroon ng corruption scandal.
there's a lot of
Naubos
discussion.
ang pera
There's a
kumbaga.
lot of discussion on the RSBS. It's part of the Feliciano report. Remember when we had the Oakwood?
Yeah,
that,
Oakwood.
Yes,
that document
yes,
is
right.
public. A chapter of that is dedicated on RSBS. But the idea of RSBS, whether gusto niyang tawaging pension or savings, is that they contribute also so that they get money.
Right.
As a part of the retirement or
So
when
it's
they
like
leave the
forced
military.
savings.
Yes,
That's what he's
But-
calling it.
forced savings, but isn't that the idea behind the pension program? Usually, and this is beyond military, that's the theoretical reason why we have pension. Sometimes consumers, individuals, workers are very myopic. We're only concerned with the now. Hindi natin naiisip what will happen to us when we retire. So that's why the government in its paternalistic role forced us na magbayad kayo ng pension so that when you retire, you will have money. Hindi kayo maghihirap. And that's the idea behind pension. It's really for savings. So if he wants to call it for savings, then let's call it for savings. But that's the
But
idea.
it's the same principle.
Yes,
Yeah.
we contribute. So the institution that will manage the money, our contribution will grow the money. And so we'll have something when we retire.
Of course, he's also saying that Secretary Jokno exaggerates when he says that in a couple of years, the whole system will collapse. And when, in fact, when you look at the GDP in relation to the MUP and how much it costs, it's just a fraction. I don't know the figures anymore. I can't recall, but that's how they look at
It's
it.
actually not, while it's associated with Secretary Jokno, the concept of a fiscal crisis, he wasn't the first to acknowledge that there's going to be, or this will lead to a fiscal crisis. If you look at the executive order of President Aquino, when he adjusted the allowances...
Cory or Noy Noy?
Noy Noy Aquino, when he adjusted the allowances of the military, in that executive order, there's recognition that we're doing this, we're adjusting the allowances instead of the base pay because of a potential fiscal crisis. So, hindi na po original si Secretary Jokno sa pagsabi ng magkaka-fiscal crisis.
Okay.
But an indication of a problem is, for example, in 2018, when President Duterte adjusted the salary of the military and uniformed personnel, it resulted to an additional 34 billion pesos expenditure on the side of government. And that whole 34 billion pesos have not been released fully
Yeah.
because of this constraints with respect to fiscal space. That's one. And then the second issue is, I don't have the graphs anymore, and since Friday, kinalimutan ko na yung mga numbers ko. But you can see that the amount of money we're spending on pension is actually much bigger na on the MOOE and the capital expense combined. So what does this suggest? As we're spending more on pension than all the necessary stuff to be more responsive to the needs of the military in active service. And we're not saying that we reduce the pension. What we're saying is there has to be a separate set of indicators when to adjust the pension and a separate set of indicators when to increase the budget and the salary of the active personnel. So that's what
But you're
we're
open
trying to
yun
do.
nga kasi nagmumuskol sila na bakit daw sila singled out. What about the other sectors? Now, was the government, when you were with the government, was the government actually considering looking at these other sectors?
Yes, there's
as well?
also an instruction to look at the judicial branch. So, hindi po sila sinisiguro.
Okay, yeah, quick question. We do wanna, I mean, we do wanna learn more about it, but at the same time, we want to get to all the other stuff, as you said, on your plate. But quick question lang. We know it's madugo yung MUP. A lot of it is policy, a lot of it is technical, a lot of it is politics also. Just quick question, not to make it about you, but you're leaving now and you being the point person there, does that affect the process at all? I mean, what in terms of what's being negotiated now with the military?
Well, probably not because we're not the legislators.
Okay.
The responsibility to produce a new law with respect to the military and uniform personnel pension program is with Congress.
Okay,
so right now there's a bill in Congress.
Sige.
And it's
So we
being
can move
discussed.
on to other difficult things that they've asked you to handle. Is Maharlika Investment Fund? Was
No,
that in your,
Maharlika
ano?
Investment Fund was not in my portfolio.
Okay.
Oh, but do you agree with the UP
Ayan,
School of
yan.
Economics professors? And their stand on it?
Prior to joining the government, I already made a lot of statement that I support having a sovereign wealth fund. What is a sovereign wealth fund? In my idea, this is a fund that will be created and funded by the proceeds from extractive sectors like mining. And the core reason for that is when we extract minerals, because these are non-renewables, there has to be an intergenerational equity. So that's the idea. And kakabit yun nung agenda na itaas natin yung tax ng mining so that we get a fair share and maybe we can set it aside and put it in a sovereign wealth fund to be invested para mapalaki, para supportahan ng mga communities at ma-invest. Because for example, sa Norway, their sovereign wealth fund, which is well cited because it's
Oil.
well managed.
Right.
It's from their oil and it's financing all their social protection programs. So that's the vision. I think when you set up a fund, it's important to know where the source of the money is, what will be the source of the fund, and what is the purpose of the fund. So when I say sovereign wealth fund, it was very clear to me why I was advocating, and I am advocating a sovereign wealth fund.
Oh, sige.
But the Maharlika
Ayan
is
na nga.
not in my portfolio.
Is it a sovereign wealth fund?
Is your idea of a sovereign wealth fund reflected in what the House of Representatives muna passed?
I think the one that was adopted is not a sovereign wealth fund.
The one adopted by the House, which was passed by the Senate,
Yeah.
that is the final version
Yes.
that was signed. That is not a sovereign
It's
wealth
not a
fund.
sovereign wealth fund.
What is it? A development
It's a development investment fund, something like that.
Pero malinaw ba yung mga sourcing ng funding?
Well, definitely the law that was passed have enough safeguards to make
meron
sure
naman.
that our SSS and GSIS will not
Will
be
be
included
protected.
in the
Okay.
fund. So there
Yan lang.
are
What about
safeguards.
the
But only,
dividends
only
of
for
the
that,
BSP?
for the pension funds. But what about the others? BSP, for example,
BSP,
diba? Dividends
yes.
are going in there.
Yes.
Pera
Well,
ng land
the
bank.
biggest question there is, do we have the money to really put in the fund? So we will see, because now we have the IRR, and then they are recruiting individuals to sit in the board and to run the Maharlika Investment Fund. So
It could work. That's what you're saying.
it depends on who's going to manage it and the mechanism of transparency and accountability that will be implemented when you have that fund. It could work.
Ito question, curious talaga, you've had this privileged perch being inside government. A lot of people can be knee-jerk when it comes to any criticism of government, especially of President Marcos in particular, especially when it comes to policy stuff, di ba? Some people are predisposed to not believing him, not liking him at all. But you've been there, you've sat there. I imagine you've been part of briefings. You've been in the same room as President Marcos. I'm just curious, your impression of President Marcos when he sits in meetings, when he takes in the advice from the technical people in government, from economic managers, your impression of him?
Well, to be honest, I had a very limited interaction because most of the time, the meetings will be at the cabinet level. The only meeting I had with him where I had a discussion is when we are working on the VAT refund of tourists, which I supported and which I was working on with Senate. So he was supportive of that.
But was
Sige.
was he engaged? Was he? I mean, I'm just curious in terms of, you know how it is, diba? You're in a room, you meet somebody for the first time, and you could tell if somebody seems to be, oh, that's the right question. He's asking the right question. He's interested. He's concerned. Your impressions of him at that level?
Yeah, I guess so. He was asking questions, and he was tasking the various officials that are present to address and to that one kasi is with respect to the tourism sector. So he was tasking the various agencies to do their job in terms of making sure that we grow the tourism sector.
What's next for CIELO Magno? Are you planning to pursue advocacies anything in particular?
I'm planning to write a book. A high school textbook on economics.
Akala ko inside DOF
Tingin
and
ko
Malacanang.
Yeah. That will discuss the supply and the demand
Okay yan.
for high school. For high school. Teach them young, teach them ano. No?
Actually, there's a lot of talk about that now, financial literacy.
Yes.
No.
And then I was planning to write that book and contextualize it. Use actual experiences. So maybe I'll use the rice cap
Katulad ng
as an
kanina.
example.
Okay, it's such a general question, but of course, time and time again, and some of us here are about to retire as journalists. But the economy, the economy just seems to keep moving at a very, very slow pace. I mean, the economic revolution that we had been hoping, let's just say since 1986, okay, when there was a people revolution that took place, just doesn't seem to be happening. And at this point, for people like us who have witnessed, the last 36 years, we wonder what it would take to actually get the Philippines in the economic world power map.
Napakahirap naman ng tanong.
Oh, okay, that's it for the chief.
Parang hindi ko kaya sabi lang yung isusulat.
Supply and demand nga lang.
Kaya ko sagutin yun, pero baka mag-iisang linggo yung show natin.
PhD yung hinihingi mo.
No, but
But I
really,
think if there's one important lesson that I think we learned from this, even if we are in government, I think we have to be honest and we have to be upfront to our bosses and to point out that if a policy is wrong, we say it. Because we're not there. It's like the emperor's new clothes. Diba?
Yeah.
You just say, oh, yes, boss, it's good, even if it's not. So
I
I
actually
think
thought it was-
we have to be able to say that.
I actually thought it was telling that they found it an attack when there were no words attached to your
Yeah.
graph, di ba?
Oh,
It was just a graph. You
and
just-
well, a statement that said, I'm misteaching.
Yeah, diba?
But of course, we all know that to the government that was loaded, I guess. So,
We'd like to say thank you to Professor CIELO Magno. Abangan niyo po yung kanyang libro titled The Emperor's New Clothes.
uy, copyrighted na yun.
In economics.
But thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us tonight. Very, very
Salamat.
interesting
Thank
discussion
Maraming
tonight.
salamat
Thank
po.
you. Thank
Salamat
you.
po.
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you.
The highlights from our conversation with former Finance Undersecretary CIELO Magno.
July of this year, he was already asked to remove me. Yes, so he was asked to remove me because of being Kakampink. Initially, I hesitated. It was a very difficult decision for me. But I thought I have to give this a chance. Because at the end of the day, regardless of who's in Malacanang, we have to work and fight for the interests of the people. So ano ba yung purpose? Ba't nagkaroon ng price cap? Is this really to address the concerns of the public? Or is it to address a political campaign promise and make people believe that it has been delivered?
Sabi nga ni Professor Magno, The Emperor's New Clothes, that says a lot about what happened in the last few days.
Pero babaguhin mo yung title kasi nga, copyrighted na yun. Hindi pwede
Baka
gamitin
ma-IP
yun.
pa tayo.
Last few days lang ba yung reference niya?
Well, actually, hanggang July.
Ang layo-layo niya na high school, ano lang yan, high school bestseller lang iniintay
Bakit
natin.
yung Emperor's New Clothes fairy tale nga yun, no?
But ako two things. I really appreciated going to the point of her book, di ba? She wants to simplify, make everybody understand economic principles. The way she made us understand itong
Supply and demand.
graph, itong supply and demand, and ang implications
Something as simple as that pala.
for
no? Parang-
everybody, for traders, for consumers, for retailers,
For government
for
officials.
government.
No?
Di ba? Sa malaking
Intindihan naman
bagay.
nila yan.
Oh, but the other thing,
you know, bottom line nga is,
Yes.
I think it's really politics. No?
yes.
It's really sad that the economy, well, as Bill Clinton says, it's stupid.
Kasi economy is
Yan ba sinabi ni Bill Clinton?
It's the
This
economy stupid.
yeah.
Baka mamaya ma-misinform yung ano ha.
Pero medyo open-ended yung question na kung ang economic managers did not recommend this, who did?
They were not even
Kaya nga
consulted.
eh.
That's the point.
Sinong
di ba?
bumulong?
Ako alam ko na, pero hindi ko mo alam.
Abangan nyo sa column ni Ami Pamintuan. Sasabihin ang sagot. Hindi, pero yun talaga yung katanungan eh, di ba? Kasi that was really one of the big revelations. Not even, it's not like they were surprised by the decision after a long debate. No, parang
They were shocked that it
out
was
of
even
the
on the
blue.
table.
Pero according to the reports, it was DTI and
Yes,
DA. di ba?
DTI and
Although,
DA.
it's
Yeah.
significant na yung mga opisyal ng DTI and DA, hindi naman sila nagsasabi na
Walang
kami
name.
nag-recommend
Walang
yan.
name.
Yeah.
And then,
And you would think
bottom line,
DTI is very
diba?
familiar with law of supply and demand. Kasi
Oo.
sila nag-monitor ng supply and
Exactly.
demand.
At saka sila usually ang nagre-recommend talaga ng price cap.
Yeah.
DTI.
Well,
Kaya lang at
SRP.
this point.
No,
Yeah,
but
SRP.
Yes, but of course, it has to be based naman on sound economic policy.
Pero
diba?
usually, pag
So,
nag-SRP, DTI ang nag-announce.
Oo.
No? In this case,
Hindi
it was
Malacanang.
Malacanang.
DA siya eh.
Well, puro ano na lang yan.
Oo. And then, ganito na lang, para yung going back to the book, Tagalogin niya. Diba? I think this is so basic.
Sige nga, Emperor's New
Tagalogin.
Clothes. Sige nga, Tagalogin mo.
Oh, sige.
Bagong toga.
ng emperador.
Well,
Di ba toga tawag doon?
diba?
Anyway, sige, abangan na lang natin yung libro paglabas.
Correct.
And in the meantime, that's all we have for the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Pamintuan.
We'll see you again next week. I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.